The judge has a notice. He has a notice. Yeah. Touch me. Please don't touch me. Please don't touch me. You touch me with your arm. You can't do that.
Well, it happened again. ICE agents performed an arrest outside of a courtroom in a public hallway. However, people standing in the hallway tried to stop the arrest by saying there is a court order.
There's a notice right here. There's a notice.
Okay, we already know that too. We know that too.
And that is a lawyer putting his finger in an ICE agent's face. So what we're going to do is work together. We're going to look through all of the footage, look through all of the policies, and make a decision together. But first, here's what the local news had to say about the situation.
ICE agents waiting right outside the courtroom, arresting people who've shown up for their hearings, but judges were told by the federal government to terminate their cases, leaving them vulnerable to arrest as soon as they walk outside. Once in custody, they're on a fast track to being deported.
Lack of notice and even basic human decency is what's super shocking to all of us.
So now that you understand the premise, ICE agents wait outside the courtroom. Once the illegal immigrant is done with court, they come into the hallway, thus they get arrested. Now let's watch the raw footage, try to listen to what the people are saying, and then we can investigate from there.
She just continued. Okay, so come on, let us do our job. And could you step back, please? If you doesn't want to talk, then you can talk. Do you mind, please? I'm trying to talk to you because I'm trying to talk to you. Okay, listen. No, listen. I'm trying to. No, the judge is printing a notice. The judge is printing a notice right now. The judge has a notice. Who is your supervisor?
Now here's where things get interesting. You heard someone in the background say, hold on, a judge is currently printing out a notice right now, and you saw some hesitation from the ICE officer. We will dig into all of the details and legalities, but let's continue.
The judge has a notice.
Why are you ignoring the judge's orders? Wait until I speak with your supervisor.
The judge has a notice. He has a notice. Yeah. You're going exactly against the judge.
Why are you ignoring the judge's orders?
Why are you participating in a fascist takeover of the government?
Now, when I did some research for this case, there had to be a reason why people in that hallway are freaking out over the judge notice. There has to be something going on. Well, this is because back in 2020, in the San Diego area, the courthouse is in San Diego, there was a court order by the judge saying no more arresting illegal immigrants or the families of illegal immigrants in any court areas.
Statement from ICE about this practice of expedited removal. An immigration judge has reviewed DHS's motion to dismiss proceedings and agreed that dismissal is appropriate in these cases. The Trump administration widely broadened the scope of who qualifies for expedited removal. Now, migrants without adequate documentation proving they've been in the U.S. for more than 2 years can be deported without a court hearing.
So basically, ICE has their own judge that says, yes, you can do what you're doing, everything in the hallway is good to go, and then you have the local judge there saying, hold on, I'm going to serve you up some papers, and people shouting at the ICE agents. Where it gets even more interesting, California state law back in 2019 actually passed a law saying a person shall not be subject to civil arrest in a courthouse while attending a court proceeding or having legal business in the courthouse. However, you scroll down a few more, this section does not apply to arrest made by pursuant to a valid judicial warrant.
You're literally violating a judge's order.
To everybody present in the United States,
I'm backwards.
you are knowingly violating the due process rights. You are criminals.
This is a fucking kidnapping.
Hey, back up.
It is a
I'm not. Please don't touch me. Please don't touch me. Please don't touch me. You touch me with your arm. You can't do that.
You're violating.
You can't do that.
Fucking kidnapping, man. Y'all are going to be held accountable for this. You know that, right?
So the people in the background are accusing ICE of being fascist. You guys are kidnapping. You can't be here. But when you do look into 8 U.S. Code 1357, it's pretty clear what ICE can do, can't do, what they can say and can't say. Generally speaking, ICE can be in any public area and do the duties of ICE, which is deportations or inquiring, are you an illegal immigrant or not? So ICE is within their total realm of responsibility and legality to be in that area and perform that arrest.
There's going to be a day where you're fucking held accountable for crimes against humanity. This is a kidnapping. You know how many years in prison people get for kidnapping? 20 years. You want to go to prison for 20 years? Keep going with your shit.
I have the notice.
There's a notice right here. There's a notice.
Okay, we already know that too.
That's a notice from the judge.
Now, the question is, how is ICE able to get away with all of this? There is a judge notice. The state of California says you can't make this arrest. Well, ICE actually tells us how they're able to do this.
It is important to keep in mind that the underlying basis for a non-citizen's removability may be due to some criminal violation, but the removal warrant used by ICE is not a criminal warrant signed by a federal judge. In fact, the removal warrant used to process the non-citizen's removal is signed by an ICE official based on a finding that the person is removable from the United States.
And remember, the man being arrested here is already an illegal immigrant, so off the bat, that is enough to deport you. However, what about all of these other details? Do you even have the right warrant? Can ICE be in this hallway? Straight from ICE.
So, John, what are the differences between a criminal warrant issued by a federal court and a removal warrant issued by an ICE official?
Jenna, the primary difference is that, unlike a criminal warrant issued by a federal court, a removal warrant does not authorize the ICE officer to enter into an REP area to execute the warrant.
So what does that mean to an ICE officer who goes out to execute an ICE administrative removal warrant?
Basically, what this means is that the ICE officer has the authority to arrest the person named in the warrant so long as the officer locates the person in a public, non-REP location.
Now remember, the people are yelling and shouting, you're kidnapping someone. However, ICE is in the public hallway, a public area. They are a federal entity. Thus, they have jurisdiction in this federal area to operate. But the type of warrant is very crucial to operate in the public area.
Basically, what this means is that the ICE officer has the authority to arrest the person named in the warrant so long as the officer locates the person in a public, non-REP location. For example, the person is located walking down a public sidewalk.
Well, and what would happen if the ICE officer locates the person in an REP area, such as his or her home?
Well, in that case, the administrative removal warrant authorizes the ICE officer to arrest the subject, but not to enter into an REP area, such as his or her home, unless consent to enter is given.
Now, something else I want to point out is you don't have an official serving or an official statement of a judge stopping anything that these ICE agents are doing. Again, these ICE agents are operating with the type of warrant that's not signed by a judge, which ICE can do that if they operate within a public area. However, you heard somebody shout out, hey, the papers are here, they printed out the notice. However, that's not an official way to actually serve any sort of justice or court order or anything, which is why ICE just continue to walk and do their job. So again, that argument that the judge supersedes ICE, that is true with federal judges as far as a temporary block or order, and you have those battles in the court, but in this specific case, simply printing out a piece of paper, that doesn't stop the operations.
It's just a total disregard by the government for due process rights.
On Truth Social last month, President Trump said it was not possible to give everyone a trial.
This is basically people not given a chance to even say why they deserve to stay here when we told them they would have a chance to make that case.
Immigration attorney Weitzel was in court with a client this week.
I saw the doors swing open and there were ICE agents waiting there to pick them up and take them.
She doesn't think this will help with the backlog of 4 million cases.
Now, as far as the morality of this and is the Trump administration tricking these illegal immigrants, I'll get to that in a second. However, when it comes to due process, I found a clip from MSNBC who actually gives the reality to Democrats. This is what due process is, especially when it comes to illegal immigrants.
But then we have general deportation. That's what I'm talking about right here.
Yep. So federal law allows for even broader and speedy removal than has been used in the past. And expedited removal, as you talked about, allows for summary removal. That means no entitlement even to a hearing, possibly within 24 hours. It hasn't been used as broadly as, say, the Trump administration might want to use it, but under the statute, it is permissible to remove aliens who arrive at the border, and even those who have been here for 2 years, although that 2-year provision you talked about is the lesser used in practice. But just because it isn't used very often doesn't mean it's not a part of federal law that can be used.
Now, this is very crucial. I also want to point out, we are not given a lot of public information as far as any criminal history or anything about this illegal immigrant right here. All we know is that he is an illegal immigrant. He was walking in a public hallway and he was served the warrant and is arrested. But I also want to point this out. He's also being called a San Diego man. This really sounds like the Kilmar Obrego Garcia case of the Maryland man, but we don't know as much about this guy than we do Kilmar Obrego Garcia.
And it will be used because it's permitted under federal law. The Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decided that aliens who arrive at the border, and they define people who arrive at the border as people who have even been here 2 years, if they have fraudulent documents, if they don't have sufficient documents, they can be removed in an expedited fashion unless they seek asylum. So you don't run into those due process concerns, at least presumably because that statute, as it exists today, is still valid. Now, that's not what's at stake with the Venezuelans and the Alien Enemies Act. But the government's argument is that, hey, court, listen, you're telling us we need to provide notice. Well, take a look at this federal law. It says that we don't even need to have a hearing. It can happen within 24 hours. So if that's good enough for people who arrive here who are aliens, it's certainly okay for people that the president has deemed to be alien enemies.
Now, I do want to point this out. Oftentimes you hear about ICE allowing for the illegal immigrant to make it into the courtroom, and then after the fact, once they leave the courtroom, they make the arrest. This is because, like in the state of Wisconsin, it's actually illegal to prevent somebody from getting into the courtroom or creating compelling factors. So this is why oftentimes you see ICE waiting for the illegal immigrant, get into the courtroom. Once they get out, then we can take care of you. So ICE is not breaking any other laws.
There are people who were arrested yesterday who had no idea this was going to happen to them. They go home, or their children go home from school, and they're not there anymore.
In that statement, ICE also tells us people who are arrested are being taken into custody pending removal from the United States. Activists believe they're being taken to the Otay Mesa Detention Center.
But as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you that due process sometimes feels a little hollow. Going to your point about habeas, I file habeas petitions all the time. It's a slightly different statute because I'm usually dealing with criminal defendants. These are detainees. But the vast majority of habeas petitions are denied without even an evidentiary hearing. In fact, rare is the case where you get an evidentiary hearing. For criminal defense attorneys, any of you watching now, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got a hearing on my habeas petition, because most of the time they get tossed. And it makes sense because anyone who knows prisoners or the way they litigate, they file a lot of habeas petitions. And your point is spot on. If there was a hearing for every habeas petition, the courts would shut down.
Okay, so generally speaking, it does look like ICE is operating legally and within their bounds or scope of operations in a public hallway with the proper warrants. They are doing what they're supposed to be doing. However, you can always make a case for anything as far as, hold on, the judge has a warrant out here, there are state laws, you got this, you got that, which is what we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing a lot of these court battles, which ultimately Trump mainly ends up winning, especially when it comes to the deportations. And you even heard over from MSNBC, as far as this due process, what we're learning, it's not these OJ trials like we heard on MSNBC. A lot of it could be less than 24 hours. Hey, you're not supposed to be here. Goodbye. That's your due process. The only thing I will give Democrats, because in this particular case, a lot of Republicans don't like that this is happening as well, is the misleading factor. So if Democrats had a case, it's definitely the morality of it. Is the Trump administration lying to these illegal immigrants? Are you misleading them and then entrapping them? That is probably the only case a Democrat can make within these specific instances of telling illegal immigrants to go to court, canceling the court case, getting them in the hallway. Again, I'll let you guys decide how you feel about that, but my job is to give you all of the details and facts. This is what I have so far. I'm sure we're going to hear more and more about these cases. These are popping up almost every single day, where you have the interference of ICE trying to do their job, the public is in the hallway, or judges are physically trying to remove the ICE agents. Let me know how you guys feel about this, but to me, from what I'm seeing and everything I laid out, ICE is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing within their legal bounds of operation. Thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.